Welcome to my video blog. As I mentioned during my previous video blog, I'm going to talk about lean and specifically I want to compare between lean applicability in manufacturing and service being a unique one compared to manufacturing in terms of many aspects when you compare with the management sector. So let me contrast and give my perspective of how we can apply lean in the service industry. Primarily to start with, what is the service industry, the nature of service industry operations. Let me explain. I'm Nanda Kumar. I'm a certified Six Sigma Black Belt by ASQ, American Society for Quality. The nature of service industry, if you look at the primary one is the cost of people, because people are the major raw material in a service industry, and also the customer and the service provider, they work very closely. Even if you take, for example, restaurant, and the value chain is you order a food and the food will be cooked and then it will be delivered, you are part of it. Or if you go to the bank, there's a document to be submitted and they are in touch with you, and the bank applications to be filled and proofs to be given and so on and so forth. And throughout the value chain of account opening, customer plays a major role as well. So they work very closely with the value chain in a service industry, which is very different from a manufacturing. For example, if you need a car, you don't go to the manufacturing site, or you don't know what's happening behind. All that you need to take a car from the showroom, so which primarily doesn't happen in the service industry. So you work very closely with the customer if you are in a service industry. These are all very high level unique features of service industry. Let's talk about the challenges faced. Just I'm depicting primarily what are the challenges faced by the service industry, and this blog primarily I'm dealing with how the difference between service and manufacturing. Manufacturing is so simple to explain. When it comes to service industry, you have a lot of challenges. So some of the challenges in terms of service industry is longer cycle time. And any process you take, there are a number of processes, be it an account opening, completeness of account opening, and or even a credit card issue. Primarily, many service processes, you will find the longer the cycle time. And similarly the departmental interfaces, unlike in a manufacturing industry where you have different processes and machines and so on and so forth. One raw material goes to the other one, and semi-finished goods move to the other one. At least the clarity in the departmental or functional processes are clearly defined. How much it is followed, it's a different thing, but at least defined. If you take a service industry, it's not that clearly defined. When you walk into, for example, purchase order to be raised, there's a purchase request. Many times the purchase request raised not as per the procedure developed by the purchase department. So what is the interface? Similarly, when they are supposed to get back to you in terms of approving the purchase request, or disagreeing the purchase request, or raising certain queries, so the interfaces is not very clear. It may just stay with the purchase department unless you follow up. So that's an example. And too many activities I have seen most of the service processes where since it's not very visible, it's not very tangible, so naturally you do a lot of activities without you knowing it. So naturally the processes are constructed with a lot of activities, not looking at the optimum level of activity to be designed. This is a challenge. Next, if you look at the process disconnects, which I experience most of the time with service industry, is quite clear. And with this example, I just wanted to communicate. If you look at how the customer explained, for example, pictorially depicted, customer has explained this way, and look at it how the project leader understood it, and how the analyst designed it, and how the programmer wrote it, and how the business consultant described it, and how the project was documented, how the operations installed it, and how the customer was billed, and how it was supported later. Finally, what the customer really needed. Can you see here what the customer really needed in this, and what the customer, how the customer has explained, how the project leader has understood here is a clear, a pictorial way of depicting how we understand the customer in the service industry. This is more prevalent in the case of service industry because the whole design of a product in manufacturing, okay, you may capture the customer requirement. Nevertheless, it's primarily dependent on the service provider. That's the classic difference. Let's go to the next slide and look at it. Now, uniqueness of service industry in a summary, hidden waste. Hidden waste, as I mentioned in my previous lecture as well, previous slide, sorry. Hidden waste, you can't see the waste inside the organization, because if it's a manufacturing, the moment you walk through and you will find out a lot of inventory is waiting, so you know the waste. Second is the lack of standardization primarily. I'm going to deal with a greater level of detail. Let me cover quickly. Hidden waste, lack of standardization, customer dissatisfaction, very high level in a service industry, just in case if you miss the value chain. Let's look at it, the hidden waste. Inventory, as I mentioned, inventory or finished goods, semi-finished goods, it's very visible in a manufacturing, unlike in a service industry. And the waste, as defined by the lean, it's not as visible in a service industry. For example, if there are a lot of transactions waiting for your attention in the computer, you can't come to know. If a lot of papers have to be moved, probably you may keep it in the file and nobody can see it. How many instructions are waiting for you, how many purchase order to be approved, or probably if it is automated, then all the more difficult for you to understand there are inventory waiting, so you may not act as much as in the service industry. Coming to the dissatisfaction, which I mentioned previously, the customer dissatisfaction in the case of product or in the case of service, both are very different. So product is as soon as you use it, you come to know, or when the car gets delivered, you know if there is a scratch, immediately you know that's also at the end of it. But whereas in the service, you are part of it. For example, if you walk into the restaurant, if the guy doesn't come and give you the menu card, let's say within 5 minutes, because you go there and wait for for your guy friends to come, and then you catch up with them and you talk to them. If he comes very early also, you are not happy. If he comes very late also, you are not very happy. So which means it starts from the menu card issue in the case of restaurant, and the way he takes the order, food order, and finally, for example, if it takes more time when the food is being served, then also you're not happy about it, which means till the bill you settle, and the customer dissatisfaction is throughout the value chain, unlike in a manufacturing where you get the final product. Probably if the product fails, you will be dissatisfied. That may be the classic difference. Standardization. In a manufacturing where the machine involved, there is a design department. Design gives the manufacturing, this is the way you need to assemble or manufacture. So largely they can't vary the way in which the product is designed. Whereas in the service industry, primarily the people running the process, I may think, okay, let me do this, let me tweak this, let me redefine this. It's a highly possible ground for people to decide how to do it largely. So the dependency on people is very high. So the standardization is weak in service industry. I don't say standardization not possible. I'm saying it's very weak. So all the more we need to bring in the best practice, lean or Six Sigma as the case may be. So quickly on the difference between manufacturing and service, how we can differentiate. So this will set the ground for lean application, which I'm going to cover in my next blog. But nevertheless, we need to understand how in a manufacturing, how it is in the service industry. Look at the contrast here. Major invested capital, which I talked about, machinery, here the people. The waste in this case, you can see the, you can really see with your naked eye. You can, the moment you walk into any manufacturing, you see a lot of items waiting, finished, semi-finished, or in between, or raw material, whereas here largely hidden. It's all in the computers, systems, and so on. So you can't find out. And here the flow meaning, since lean uses the term flow, primarily raw material. Definitely there is an information flow, but primarily the raw material which I am choosing. But here in the service industry, it's primarily the information. Information is more complex than a raw material moving from one station to the other. And here the customer largely not part of the value chain conversion, maybe at the beginning as a requirement, at the end to collect the product. Whereas in the service industry, he is forming part of the value chain, which is very complex in nature. Further, Product defect after delivery. What I said, customer comes to know when the product is delivered. I come to know, okay, the product is failed. For example, mobile phones, it's not working. If it's a car, it doesn't start at the first crank. Maybe you come to know at the end of it. Whereas the failure, if you put it in a service industry, every stage you can find a failure. The menu card issue, probably the food comes arrived late, or the bill is wrong, or bill is late, to receive. You will find n number of issues throughout the product service value chain. That can be the classic difference. Here, the machine being a bottleneck. If the machine speed or the output, what it generates between machine A and machine B, the output rate of two different machines can be the bottleneck, primarily to handle in a manufacturing. Whenever you talk about bottleneck identification and the flow and the speed, whereas here in service industry, primarily you see the handoff between processes. And definitely you will find it in a service where my process and the next process, there is no clear handoff, there is no speed. You will calculate in the sense, previous process will produce so many transactions or instructions, and I have to manage it. Nothing of that sort is possible, or rather, that's not the way the processes are designed. Coming to the solution side, the Pokayaki principle in a manufacturing, primarily simple in the sense easy to identify what should be the Pokayaki principle, foolproof, mistake proofing. Whereas in a service, it's highly people dependent, so naturally the foolproof process, I don't say not applicable, I don't say it's you can't find out, but it takes a lot of time and challenge to find out. Variation. The important one is the variation, which we talked in Six Sigma also it talks about it. Variation in the customer demand and the imbalance, because the way the customer demand, that's the way you need to organize the whole manufacturing line. You can't go and tell the customer, I can't produce the speed at which you want. You need to align it. So variation is introduced by the customer in terms of demand, market demand, customer demand. Here, variation is not at all part of the study. Whenever we talk about lean in service, primarily we talk about who does what and why so many activities and so on, and we never talk about one of the variation which lean talks about it. Three different types of waste: Muda, Mura, and Muri. The Mura is the variation. The variation is not primary study of it. We need to bring in that concept as well, largely in service industry. It's applicable, but that's not part of the whole study usually. So that can be the difference. In summary, though I talked about difference, I am not saying not applicable. That's why I'm summarizing here. Lean has penetrated into manufacturing to a larger extent. You find every manufacturing sector across the globe, you will find lean as pretty good. But in service industry, some of the studies I have read, papers talking about lean in service, even in Japan, they feel still, lean is not as penetrated as in the manufacturing, in a service industry, which is largely untouched, and there's a huge improvement opportunity possible. But the approach methodology, lean, definitely is key to success, and it's equally applicable in a service industry, is the point to convey. So in my next blog, I'm going to cover value creation, how to create a value creation as a definition. Lean starts with value. So with a few examples, how the value creation can happen. That will be my next blog. And thank you so much for watching this blog. Please subscribe to my channel and look for Lean Six Sigma topics I'm going to share. Thank you so much. And the blog site is given here, and you can reach out to my mail ID as well. In case you have any comments, please drop the comments in the comment section. Thank you so much. See you in my next blog. Thank you.